I will not put the politics that are being discussed on this table because we saw G2G from day one, and we know what problems this country was going through before G2G came in as a system of importation of petroleum. I think when His Excellency the President was coming into office, I think even that Saturday, he normally gives that example. That Saturday before he was sworn in, oil marketers called on him because he was getting briefings from government and there was a handover process. But guess what? The first people who wanted to see him were oil marketing companies. And they told him, we're in a fix. We can't get dollars. I have a requirement of $20,000 in a day, but I only are able to access at the maximum $5,000. How many marketers do we have? We have 145 marketers. That time it could have been 150. All these marketers, because oil cost was being paid in dollars. Because the importer will bring the product, they have paid the supply in dollars, you have to pay the importer in dollars so that he can be able to pay back the supply. You've opened a letter of credit. So that letter of credit, when the cargo lands here, you're supposed to pay it within 5 days. And we were depending on a spot market. And let me tell you, Jeff, I think we take these matters lightly, but the amount of money the private sector spends in terms of oil payment per month is to the tune of $500 million. Private money, no government coin in it. So when these guys went to see His Excellency, they said we can't access dollars. His Excellency summoned the entire government, including CBK, including ourselves as a regulator, and asked where is the problem. And he was told, currently the dollars have left the market. You know the FedEx that time was very high. And you see dollars were being mopped from the frontier markets going back to the US. So they were in very little demand. And because of the system we had then, oil had to be paid in dollars. A ship would come to Mombasa and spend 3 weeks. So when a ship is waiting in Mombasa for 3 weeks and you're paying the marriage equivalent to about $31,000 a day, could you multiply that and tell me who was being exposed to the high prices? It's the consumer. And that's when His Excellency requested his team of advisors, including other government technocrats, can you give me a solution? And there were a lot of discussions around what can be done. The G2G system like we have here had never been tried and tested anywhere. We are the first ones to do it as a country, especially in this region. And I'll come to what has been done in terms of even benchmarking by other countries. We've seen Malawi, we've seen Burundi come here to check and benchmark on the G2G. And basically, now when that system was crafted, then of course there were discussions that went in with the oil company. You mentioned about Emirates National Oil Company, which we call ENOC, and you've also mentioned about Aramco Trading Fujairah. Those are companies that are owned. One is owned by the government of Saudi Arabia, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Then we have the government of UAE, which owns the other two. The question that was being asked, because now I'm coming to the companies that they nominated. For you to import oil in Kenya, you must have a license. You must be licensed by EPRA ourselves. Those companies were given an option. You either establish a subsidiary here and is licensed by EPRA because you can't bring the oil into the country without a license. And they say that's none of our business. We are suppliers. So the question they were asked then, because this is a G2G arrangement, can we then nominate our national oil company? And I'm coming to question of Mheshimiwa. Those guys said we have not dealt with national oil companies, the National Oil Company Corporation of Kenya, on a transaction of this magnitude. We don't know them. So they were asked then, and actually, Jeff, what they said, you cannot choose a counterparty for us. I am putting a ship worth $100 million into the waters, and I don't know my counterparty. What happens if anything happens to that cargo? The performance risk. Who is with the performance risk? And that's when they said, if we cannot be allowed to choose a counterparty which we can work with, because remember, these are the same companies who are supplying under the old system. So they had partners who they were working with, and they said, I know Jeff in Kenya, I've dealt with him, I've done his KYC, he cannot default. And you see, if I give you an LC and that LC is not honored, I have lost $100 million. Would you take that risk as an international oil company?
What about Kenya Pipeline Company? Why not use that?
Kenya Pipeline Company is not a trader. Their work is transportation of petroleum. In fact, if you look at their license reads transport and storage of petroleum products. They have never traded.
But it's a receiver.
And I am sure, even if you presented the name Kenya Pipeline, they would have to go through a vetting process. And from that is when we got letters of nomination from the international oil companies, nominating 3 companies. Initially, we had a company called Oryx Energies. Then we had a company called Galana Energies Limited. Then we had Gulf Energy Limited. And then later on, 3 other companies were added. When the other company was One Petroleum. You know, they are added subsequently. In fact, even now, nothing stops the IOC, we call them the International Oil Company, from nominating other people. So they added One Petroleum, they added Asharamis Energy, and they also added B Energy.
This is after the Gen Z demonstrations.
And the adding of any counterparty there is the forte of the IOC, because they sign a supply and purchase agreement that whenever the government of Kenya wants a quantity of oil, you are my counterparty. You will shield me against a performance risk. So they said, if we cannot be allowed to choose our counterparties, let this thing die down. And for sure, when the G2G came, and since April 2023, we've delivered about over 200 cargoes under G2G. What my brother is not telling you is that in G2G, the freight and premium, which used to be a floating figure during the open tender system, is a fixed figure. Initially, I'll give an example. Initially, we had super petrol at a premium of $97.50 per ton. Then there was a renegotiation. They brought it down to $90 per ton because the contract allows us to renegotiate those premiums. Then another renegotiation happened. We are now currently at $84 per ton. If you go to the market today, Jeff, and this is common knowledge, look at the tender results for Tanzania. They are at $250 a ton. That is what you would be buying a ton of oil in terms of freight and premium. 250, we are at 84. Diesel moved from 118. It came down to 88. Now we are at 78. So the advantage we have of G2G is the fixed premium that we are enjoying now, which would have exposed the public to a higher pump price if we were to go to the open market. Of course, we know that payment of petroleum products now, instead of paying them in dollars, you are paying them in Kenya shillings, which has basically stabilized the shilling. Initially, because of this artificial demand that was there, 150 companies were looking for dollars, and the banks thought there is too much demand. 150, maybe you are going to 10 banks as an oil marketing company. So they think there's that demand, and the rate kept on depreciating. Who knows where the rate would be today?
Okay.